Hey everyone, welcome back to Final Sector. We're going to do our 2022 driver predictions today. So who we think are going to be in the 10 teams. We assume there's going to be 10 teams, but who we think are going to be in next year's positions. So I guess we'll just get straight into it. We'll start at Mercedes. I reckon I'm just going to go literally in the order that I've written them in. So
yep, from the top.
Yeah, we'll start with Mercedes. So there's obviously been a lot of talk about who's going to be at Mercedes next year with both Bottas and Hamilton on one-year contracts, but I'm curious to know what you've got, because I've made it no secret, at least to you, who I think is going to be in the seat.
Yes, I think... Yeah. I mean, for the first seat, if we're going to jump into it, I still don't see Hamilton going anywhere. I think even if he was close to kicking the bucket, I don't think he would get the chance to try next year's cars. I think he's always, been excited about changes and everything like that. And similar to Alonso in that regard, I think Alonso's come back really to try these new regulations. And we all know, yes, he's coming back as well, because I think it gives him an opportunity to get a top team. But I think from Hamilton's perspective, same mindset thinking, I would be very surprised if he, left at the end of this year. He's really going to want to,
I'm in
put
the
in
same
a lot
boat.
of his own work into that new tech and even set them up for the future before he goes bye-bye. So
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Hamilton, I don't think there's not enough evidence to show that he'll leave at the end of this year. So he's still come out and said that, he still wants to keep racing. He still loves it. He still does it with a smile on his face. So, leaving literally as the new regulations start, like after next year, maybe you can have that discussion after he's had a year with the regulations, but you'd be hard pressed to find someone that won't go into the new regulations at all and just not trial it and be like, I'm done. All right, see ya. Especially someone of Hamilton's caliber. So, I'm saying, I think we're both saying that Hamilton's staying for next year. So, which I think is fair. I'm putting Russell in that second seat though.
It's gotta be, yeah. I think already we've seen in the media, which is not surprising from Bottas' side, where he's going, we've been doing lots of mental training and, all sorts
I saw
of
that one earlier.
Bottas version 4 or 5, whatever he's on. And I think he'll still do a fine job, but I think now that they know how much, Russell would be really wanting to get in there, and yes, it was quite lucky that he got a chance to really show himself, and he really showed himself, not even just in his on-track performances, but I think even internally they were very happy with even his few days prep he had before, he took over the seat. So this is even more reason for them to get him in there. He's still young, he's still got a chance to be there for a long time, you know what I mean? And I think as well, even get him in before Hamilton potentially leaves, so then Hamilton can even raise him within the team and effectively turn him into the next Hamilton. Dear God, we never get that again. But I think having even a year just to partner Hamilton would be amazing for him as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Ultimately I wouldn't be too surprised, but I mean it would be a shame. I think really for his career as well, he's he's ready to go into into 2022. So
100%. So I do think that Bottas, it's really a make or break year for him. So whether we're right or wrong, he has to step up this year, and he has to show that he can win the championship. If he doesn't, I don't see him staying there at all.
He would really have to be at Hamilton tier for them to consider it at this point. And I think he's well aware of that. And
hence the mental training and So, but anyway, I think we're both united on that one. So Hamilton and Russell at Mercedes for next year. Let's go to Red Bull. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but my thoughts are like nothing's going to change from this year. It's going to be Verstappen and Perez.
I think, we touched on it a bit with Mercedes, but there's very much this trend of, because there are so many changes, and this is a big regulation change, which we've had before, sure, but this is really a big fundamental, change that's going to have a lot of permutations going forward.
Yeah,
so I think
a lot
really
of
having
teams
drivers
setting up for those regulations, so they don't want to change too much.
Yeah, and it's, you've got that complication already of having everything new changing with the car. So to have people that are going ahead that already know all the team, to be able to put their own input into development, maybe, they can do a lot of the testing throughout the year. It's a case with Red Bull, certainly that, even though you could say Checo's on kind of a 1 year thing and maybe Albon will come back, maybe a junior will come up, I think that's a lot more likely for 2023 for sure. But at this stage, unless he's diabolically poor, which, yes, to be fair, could happen, I don't think it's as as likely as him staying there. And I think a big reason they picked him up as well was because of his experience in so many different teams, and therefore they'd love to use that and everything he's been with different teams, different development departments to actually help them build next year's car. So it just makes too much sense for them to keep the same two.
Yeah, I've even seen articles talking about Mercedes are worried about, because obviously they had the Mercedes engine in that Force India, is like what are they going to take to Red Bull? Like how much does he actually know, and how much wisdom can he impart on Red Bull to make them faster?
Because he's been with cars that have had that engine for so long as well, so he might have
so that's an interesting thought to entertain as well. But I can't see them. I mean, Verstappen's going to be there for as long as he wants to be.
Yes.
And
not even worth the point at this point. Even if he is going to move in the future, I don't think it'll be next year.
There's no way. I think we discussed that on the most recent podcast, actually, a very similar thing. But and I don't, similar to your reasons, I don't see them dropping Perez unless he has an absolute stinker. So, and given his track record, it seems very, very unlikely he's going to do worse than, say, Albon or Gasly or
anyone else who potentially could fill in that seat. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so we'll say that both of us again align in our views. Verstappen and Perez will be at Red Bull. Next team I've got on my list is McLaren, and we already had a discussion about this one earlier. I think we're both aligned on this one as well. It's going to be Norris and Ricciardo, isn't it? They're not going to change. They're going to stay the same.
For exact similar reasons, yeah.
I mean, Norris is sort of now finding his feet with that car. Obviously, he and Sainz were such a good pairing. Sainz probably just had the edge on him, but Norris is now at a couple of years in that car, and coming into his third year, you probably expect him to kind of lift his game a little bit more.
Yep.
And then obviously Ricciardo's only just made it in this year. He's expecting to go to the top. He's not going to be in there for 1 year, is he?
And it's a long-term initiative as well. He's not just sprinkling and dipping his toes in it, trying it out. He's really wanting to full-time do this for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can probably leave it at that. That one's probably the safest bet. One of
Get the safe ones out the way.
So both of us again, Norris, Ricciardo will be at McLaren. Next one I've got is Aston Martin. And again, this is a pretty safe one for me. They're gonna stay the same as well, aren't they?
Yeah,
it's gonna be Stroll and Vettel.
I think if they had, they used to have such a strong tie with, a really strong tie with Mercedes and with potentially a few juniors as well. I think because they don't really have those links, and if they were to pull someone, like they've just gone through, pulling someone established through Vettel, so it's unlikely they're going to do that again. And even if you look for what they might recruit from further down the field in F2 or some other series, I don't see any names really, unless one of them has a torrid year, then they'd need to pull an emergency driver. You can apply it to any of the teams, though. There's nothing really specific to this team.
The other option I saw is that, we'll probably talk about this more on the next podcast, but with Hülkenberg, he's now been given sort of a Mercedes, or he's about to be announced, I think, that he's going to be given a Mercedes sort of development driver or test driver sort of background seat, and there's the theory that he'll sort of be this super sub for both Mercedes and Aston. So he's sort of like, if either team needs him, obviously he raced in that Force India a couple of times, so they know how he can sort of, with his experience, he can just sort of jump into a car and pick it up so quickly. He's still, if you
had to argue for someone minds.
He'd be the most likely.
He's the only one you could really argue for, but that's not even a strong argument.
It's not really, no. But it's good. It's good video content, so to discuss. But yeah, no, it's, and again, Stroll's pretty much a non-negotiable. His dad owns the team. He's going to stay there, isn't he?
Unless he has a torrid year,
unless he's really shit. But I think year on year he's gotten better and better. So, as long as
he's still putting in what they need and they're able to develop, and he's doing his bit.
Absolutely. So, again, 4 in a row we've aligned, but Stroll and Vettel at Aston Martin. So the next one I've got is Alpine, and I think this is where we might differ a bit. Okay. Possibly. We'll see. I'll start with the first person is Alonso, and I don't see Alonso coming in for 1 year and then
I think the whole reason he came in was to get this chance of having something for next year, and this year's just so he probably even planned to come in this year when the regs were going to be here anyway, and it may just coincidentally be off for whatever reason. He's just like, let's get the extra year under the belt. He's not, unless something really drastic happens, he's just looking towards next year already. He's probably not even thinking about this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's even come out and said that like this year's probably they could either be 6th or 15th. So he's already being pretty realistic about where they could be, and it's like, it's fine. We'll just look to next year with the new regulations, where I guess he's excited and where he thinks that team will thrive. So I think he's pretty much a certainty. The other one I've gotten here, which is going to be a good discussion, it's one I've talked about with you in the past, and that's Gasly. I've put Gasly in that seat. I don't think Ocon's a weird one. He's had such hype around him. But since coming back after his sort of year off, he hasn't done too badly, but he hasn't sort of lit the world alight with his performances. I feel like, I don't know. I don't know that he's going to do enough to keep that seat.
I think he's in an unlucky spot where he's certainly doing more than you can argue for other drivers, but I think he still doesn't have that many kind of backup options or kind of side options. It's kind of like, this is it. So he almost needs to be in a position where, rather than trying to prove himself to everyone and all the teams, he almost just really needs to prove himself to what was Renault and now Alpine to be their main future driver. And I think he just hasn't. He's still missed the mark on that. So unless he has an amazing year, which he could, once again you could apply this to any driver, any team. But I think especially for him, if he really pulls his ass out of the bag, or
I think he of all people, along with a couple of other drivers, he's more on the chopping block than others. Like he and Bottas are probably two of the big ones for me that, like, they really need to perform, and if they don't, it's
not even the case they could get kicked out of the team. They might not have any team to go to, and have
exactly. There's no spots. Like there's a lot of really, really talented drivers, and a lot of the lower teams have got very new drivers that they're probably not going to drop after 1 year as well. So like there's very limited spots coming into next year. Everyone's all the teams have already done their prep in getting the teams that they think they want for the most part. So evidenced by the fact that half the teams haven't changed so far in our opinion, or won't change. So
I think there's still some kudos to give to some of their junior drivers. I don't think any of them will be ready, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe in 2 to 3 years they've got their 3 right in the background. They're at different levels, in terms of whether they've just joined F2 or they've been there a few years. I think it's probably a little late for Guan Yu Zhao. I think if he had a stellar year last year, they'd probably much more consider him over someone like Gasly or retaining Ocon. But I think he's just not done enough. So now I think his year this year will be more proving for some other series, or potentially to be their full-time development driver.
That was my thought as well. I think my thought was like maybe Guan Yu Zhao could have that seat, because he's obviously talked about how he's this year he's really trying to make that push for F1. But I was thinking about it realistically. I'm just like, it's probably not as a full-time driver, but definitely as like a test and reserve or a development driver, I think is more likely for him for next year at least. And then the following year, depending on what happens with Alonso, whether or not he only wants the couple of years, and then Bale, or whether Ocon or Gasly or whoever fills that other seat, if they don't perform, then maybe he could slot in there. So who else have Alpine got? They've got, is it Lundgaard? Is he part of the Alpine? Yeah, so he's also another option.
I think he's in his second. I believe he was a junior last year.
I think so.
I think he's more likely. And they have also, I shouldn't have the top of my head. I think it's someone who's graduating this year. Yeah. Right?
I'm not sure. I do know because
Piastri, right?
Is he part? He's part of Alpine.
Yes, because he was Renault, I'm pretty sure. Yes.
You're right. Yeah.
So he's the new junior. So I'd say it's definitely between him and Lundgaard. For maybe 2 years down the line at minimum, maybe even 3. I think they've definitely kept, like you'd say for Guan Yu Zhao, that he's been in that system for a few years now, and other teams might have ditched him at this point, or maybe,
he just keeps putting in performances as well, like with the F3 Asia thing.
I think more so they'd keep him on because they want to keep him in their fold, and or maybe not even giving another team a chance to pick him up. I think they're trying to keep him on for another year, and then if we had to predict who next year's development drivers were going to be for each team, I would put him in there for Alpine 100%.
Yeah,
that's why they've kept him in the fold, because I think they like his approach to the weekend. I know is a bit different. Some people say and how he kind of goes about quality the race is a bit different. So I think from a development perspective, he's excellent. Just in that peak of pace, he just lacks the consistency a bit, but they've kept him for a reason. So he should still have a long and prosperous career in motorsport.
Yeah. So you've gone with Gasly at Alpine as well, have you then?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
I know everyone predicted for this year as well. I think before Alonso really came through, or people were doubting Ocon. So I think it's maybe a bit easy to go for it, but I think when you look at Gasly, and more of a comment on AlphaTauri, which I'm sure we'll get to sooner rather than later.
I think that's my next one, actually.
He wouldn't... Like, yes, he has a home there, and he's doing very well there, but there becomes a point where his career gets to a point where either he's going to stay there and then just kind of die out, or he's going to try and move and potentially, almost pull like a Ricciardo. Ricciardo was in Red Bull, and he was doing fine there, but he was just going to keep going until he fizzled out, and he went, right, actually, I'm going to jump ship, and now look, he's jumped ship again to somewhere else. He's kind of, found a way to have a lot of teams that want him, and I think Gasly's going to try to go down the same path.
It's definitely wise from him, and I think Alpine, I mean, I don't know if we've discussed this. We've discussed this before. I don't know if we've discussed it on video, but, with Gasly being French and, Alpine being French, having that French driver, obviously that's always been talked about as well. So I think, I think next year is probably the right time, assuming Ocon does really poorly. Or not even really poorly, just doesn't really live up to the mark. So, there you go. What's that? Is that 5 in a row? We've done exactly the same choices.
I think these are I think as we go down though, it gets a bit
get a bit harder,
These are the first kind of 5 teams I wrote down, I went, no, this is pretty easy. The others actually had to give a think, do a bit of a search, bit of Wikipedia, looking at career history.
Oh, you even went that far. I didn't even. I was just like, that's...
For a few of them, there's a few details I wasn't sure of.
Sure. Actually, no, I did for one driver, but I guess we'll say for Alpine, there's Alonso and Gasly, both of us. There you go. The next one I do have is AlphaTauri. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one, because this is the one I'm least confident about, I think.
Interesting.
With Gasly leaving, I do think I'm really confident Tsunoda's going to have that first seat. Yes. 100%. Again, he's first year this year, they're not going to ditch him.
He's been brought in this year so he can almost get up to speed into the new regulations, and so he can lead kind of the AlphaTauri banner into the future with someone else. So,
but
who is that person? Someone else?
Yeah, I'm curious who you choose as your second driver, because mine might be a bit out there. But yeah, I wonder what you...
okay, if I'm going to go into it, I think if you want to look at who was probably planned to come in before anyway, it's got to be like Yuri Vips.
That's who I had. I had Yuri Vips.
Yeah, well, I have more comments though. So Yuri Vips, like, he was already in the fold. I think he was planned to come in before Tsunoda. They were going to put him in that stint similar to with Gasly, where they put him in the Super Formula to see how he went there. Yeah. And as far as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really think Gasly was super good in Super Formula. I think but that's because that series is very... it's got a ton of drivers, new and old and present in there, and it's very fiercely competitive. Yeah. And given it's purely like a fully Asian series as well, I think a lot of the locals are a lot stronger there as well, just because they're really bound into the teams that have been for many years. But I think it is a good place to really test your juniors, because they have to go into a team, have to meet up with a lot of people, that are Japanese, might not have the strongest English and that. So Gasly went down that path, and I think that did a lot for him. And Yuri Vips was supposed to go down that similar path. Unfortunately, COVID happened. He got held up. Luckily, he got to do a little bit of F2. Now, of course, he's going to get his full F2.
Yep.
I think, because there's the 3 Red Bull juniors in there. There's Yuri Vips, there's
Liam Lawson.
I think it's Jehan Daruvala and Liam Lawson. Yeah, and Liam Lawson's graduating from F3 to F2. So I think Liam Lawson probably isn't up for the mark in front of those. I know
Jehan Daruvala's had a lot of conversation around him recently as well.
Yes, he's I think, I don't know if Daruvala was also a rookie last year. Maybe he's 2 years in now.
Sure.
But they've kept him on still, and you'd say maybe in the past they might have knocked him off if you go to the traditional Red Bull, way of knocking people off when they're done with them. Once again, I think this leads into something we've discussed, where Red Bull may be trying to give people a second shot or a bit more time, and trying to be a bit more lenient. So I think Daruvala might be a bit in that slot. He could do really well this year, challenge Vips as well. I think they'll do well for him. I still think Vips has the lead just because he's been in there for a while, because they've almost put him through that pre-F1 program that they put Gasly in. Once they sent Gasly to Super Formula, before the season even started, everyone went, okay, yeah, he's coming in soon, because Red Bull obviously getting him ready by, putting through this process. So,
sure.
And Vip's performances last year, even when he was in F2 quite late, was quite strong. And there's no reason why that shouldn't continue this year. So
I have seen some of his results, and he always seems to be sort of, maybe not the top, but he's always sort of towards the top of every.
He gets towards the top, even though he's definitely had less preparation and time than others have. So I think this year will be interesting for the three of them. I think even if Yuri Vips maybe performs a bit lower than one of the other two, I think he still has that shoe-in shot. Just because I guess Red Bull as well look a lot more for the culture of the driver rather than specifically just the outright pace.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, but it could be any of them. Yuri Vips is still the bet, and Liam Lawson, I reckon, in a few years, they're going to look into him and they're going to give him a lot of backing in F2 and see how he does. Unless he just drops the ball, which he could. I'll be surprised, though. I think he's got quite a lot of hype around him.
Is there any merit to thinking that now that Red Bull have taken a driver outside their fold in Perez, is there any merit into thinking they could take a driver outside their fold for AlphaTauri?
I think they potentially would if they didn't have as many juniors in F2 and F3. I think if their pool was maybe a little more dried up, or if their drivers weren't really performing. But I think there's a lot of hype around Vips, and Lawson as well has a fair amount. So
100%.
If they all fell down, of course. But I think they've got a good lineup coming through again. They went through that period, as you say, where they were kind of
we've discussed this before.
Scavenging for talent. But I think now they've got Sonoda. Sorry, that they're all Sonoda that they're almost training up now, which I imagine would replace maybe Checo or Max in the future if they moved on. That of course makes sense. That's why AlphaTauri's ultimately there. I think it will be less likely now than it has been the past few years.
Sure.
In Checo and even Albon, who they pulled out from the Formula E program. So.
Oh, that's fair. So Sonoda and Vips were saying again. Both
I don't know if you had any other comments, but that's
no. That was about all I had. I think it seems very likely they'll pull from their junior Formula program. This is all assuming that Gasly leaves.
Yes.
Gasly
almost talking about it like it's fact.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's just what we have to do. We have to be confident in our decisions.
Yep.
But yeah, we'll say Sonoda and Vips for both of us. I think we've been aligned for all 6 teams so far. So, and this one I actually completely forgot until down here is Ferrari. It's the next team I've got there, which probably should be higher up as in terms of certainties. It's gonna be Sainz.
They should be grouped with the others that were kind of going.
Next. Yeah. We spend like 10 minutes on AlphaTauri, and then we get to Ferrari. It's like, it's gonna be Sainz and Leclerc. All right, let's move on. Cool.
Yeah, I think very similar reasons to even Red Bull and McLaren. They have a new driver coming in, but there's little sense in kicking them out unless they're very junk. And even in a driver like Sainz, you'd say, I think Sainz is more likely to stay at Ferrari than Checo would be at Red Bull, for example.
Yeah, so I 100% agree. Yeah.
That's very much a big move of going, we've seen your number of years Sainz, let's bring you in for the long haul. And with Leclerc and Ferrari aren't really known for churning their drivers either. They have to want to stick with 2 strong guys. And
literally
their next 2
grinding them into the ground, and then they can leave of their own volition.
With the flowers. The flowers all wilting
out. There's really no one else that's in the discussion for me at all. Like, there's no
that as well.
There's no one that would take that. Like, from the Ferrari juniors, I don't see anyone else that would take either of those spots from them. So, it's
and I don't even think they'd have the power to pull a big name as well if they had a chance at a big name like a Ricardo or anything like that.
At the moment, no.
They have the power to do that. And even then, it would be much more likely a 2023 thing to have those that discussion than next year.
Yeah, 100%. All right, well, both Sainz, that's 7 in a row. Sainz and Leclerc we're going with. So, I've got Alfa Romeo next. I guess almost one of the Ferrari junior teams at this point. So I've got... Yeah, I had a little bit of a think. Yeah, if you want to go first.
What's your first? This one, I probably should have done more research on, but I kind of just went with something.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they'll retain one driver, because I think it's almost suicide not to jump into the new year. I think if it was a repeat year, they would have done what Haas did and refreshed, I think, for sure. I think it's too risky to do that not doing that.
Yeah.
I think... it's more likely they're going to retain Giovinazzi. I know some
agree.
people aren't the biggest fan of him, and like he does have a fair few spins and a bit of offs, but apparently he works really well with the team. Whenever you see him, in footage and interviews or with Kimi, they get along really well. He gets along with the team massively, which helps. Yes, what matters is the on-track performance, but there is a lot of merit in how they do off the scenes. That's also, I guess, why they've pulled Kubica in. They still put a lot of weight on him because they really like what that man does behind the scenes. So I think in terms of the two they're going to pull in, yes, Raikkonen has more experience. I still think he would at this stage now do a lot better in the background, being more of an advisor and helping out in the simulator and behind the scenes and that.
There's no way he's doing another full year.
I think even this year was quite surprising, and I don't think he's in the same boat of things we're talking about, like with Hamilton and Alonso, where he's not going to go, I'll give the new cars a shot. I don't think he gives a crap about that. I think he's just in another year because Alfa...
He literally has come out and said he does it as a hobby, so...
I think... Alpha might have missed out on a bit, maybe to get someone like Schumacher in there, something like that.
Yeah, I was surprised, actually, that he went to Haas.
We all assumed initially that they might even be the ones to get 2 new Ferrari juniors in there, or even just one of them, which they didn't. They kept Giovinazzi in there, which technically was a Ferrari junior Giovinazzi, but of course he's had a few years now. I still think it's likely that I think he will improve a bit again. I think Alfa Romeo are happy with him and how he's doing. He's, as you say, he doesn't have that peak, but they do need someone to carry over, and I think the word from behind the scene is that he's quite good at that kind of background analysis and giving feedback through to the team, and that it would be silly to lose that, I think, going into next year. Yeah,
I agree that Giovinazzi is basically going to become the senior driver there. Again, he's, like you said, he's had a couple of years in there, so I think he's well-versed enough that he can sort of train a junior driver to come in, which is who I think is...
And lead the team,
when, a junior driver comes in, which is what I think's going to happen. And I've put Schwartzman in that second seat. So, Giovinazzi and Schwartzman. I think, with Schumacher coming in, there was a few people that were on the list, and Schwartzman was the other one. There was Schwartzman and Eilert, and I think Eilert's... Is he Renault? He's Ferrari as well, isn't he?
He's Ferrari.
Yeah. But yeah, they were the 3, and I think they value, from what I've seen, I think they value Schwartzman quite a lot, and he does seem to do quite well. And he's had, last year he had a really, really good year, and I think he was a bit unlucky not to get any involvement in Formula One at all this year, not even as like a test or reserve driver. So this is all assuming he can put in sort of another good year. And if he does, I think he might be called up to that seat. So alongside Giovinazzi, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I have gone different. I went down your similar thinking. I think Schwartzman has shown out and out great pace, but I still think getting full complete weekends together over a while. I don't think he'll be able to prove it enough this year. I think this year will be really competitive. You've got a few drivers which are staying on, which were expected to do well the year before. So I think this year they'll be pushing really hard in F2. I think you've got a few juniors coming up, which are really going to shake some feathers. He's got his teammate of Piastri, of course, and I think they're going to be quite close, similar to
that's
how
going to be a tough battle. Yeah,
Schwartzman was with Schumacher. I would say for 2023, I think Schwartzman is a lot more likely.
Sure.
I think I'll make the call, because I was thinking outside of that, who else are they going to go for? And I think similar to how they originally did with Giovinazzi, I do think that Eilert has a good shot of getting in there.
You think Eilert? I actually really like Eilert.
He's full-time in the Ferrari, around the back of that. I think he'll recognize that... I think if he didn't get into any kind of full reserve driver or background driver, maybe he's only, slightly tied to a team, that he might just, not to put it bleak, but give up his dreams there. Yeah. Think about more about full-term sports cars and that. I think because he is still heavily linked to Ferrari, that he's going to give that his all and really try his best to prove behind the scenes as best he can. As I say, similar to what, Giovinazzi did. He came from a similar thing where he replaced for a few drives for Sauber, when they were still known as Sauber, of course, same team, Alfa Romeo. I just think that because... they do have this issue. Well, yes, they've got Giovinazzi and Kimi. I don't think they're going to replace both of them. I think if they were to replace both of them, it'll be that Schwartzman-Eilert thing.
Sure, yeah. But it seems unlikely,
I just think that they'll want someone who's maybe a bit more rooted and still a bit more unpredictable. I think they've suffered from the past with having someone that's a bit still... they almost have one driver that's a bit more consistent, even though he might be a bit lower, and one driver that can kind of have maybe a few peaks.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd want 2 drivers because I think Giovinazzi's going to fill that slot still, where he's going to have a few peaks. I think Schwartzman would be similar.
Okay.
Yes, they really want someone that they can pull in like Leclerc, who did amazing things for that team when he came in.
Yeah.
There's
only so many Leclercs though.
It's a big thing on F2. I think if Schwartzman has a really, really good year, he almost supposed a Schumacher year, then he's a gun-ho shoe-in. I just think he'll need 3 years in F2 total to really get to that point. I think his third year.
You know F2 more than I do, so...
Yeah, like as I said, his pace was really good last year, especially for a rookie. And I think all credit to him. I don't think he'll get the boot anytime soon, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I think he'll need another year just to really get there. I think he's moved through the fold quite quick as well, while Schumacher kind of had like 2 to 3 years in each kind of area. And therefore, even though he started off a bit slow, it's kind of slow in general rather than being unpredictable. And now at this point, I think that's even the big risk they're saying at Haas, where he might even need a year to kind of get up to speed, that kind of thing. Not necessarily because he's crash happy, he just has to get everything gelling and he slowly gets back up to pace, and then Mick really shows how he's going. So I think it's...
So you reckon Eilert?
Because it can't be Schwartzman, I think it's more likely to be Eilert, because I think he'll see that and he'll really fight for that opportunity. And because Alfa Romeo, of course, is still tied quite closely to Ferrari, I wouldn't be surprised if he really gave that a shot. I think it's ever so slightly more likely. Even if you wouldn't say either of them are going to be likely, it has to be one of them. They have to do something.
I think
they can't just go, we've got one driver, that's it. We're only running one driver this year.
Yeah. I think
it's more likely than Kimi, I should say. I think both of them are more likely than Kimi continuing.
Yeah,
I have to say.
Outside of those two, like you said, I don't know who else. The other thought I entertained is... It's a really silly thought, but the idea that maybe Schumacher could move to Alfa Romeo if they have shown that they're the better team, because Haas are probably going to have a bit of a stinker this year. Like if they've shown they've been the better team and Schumacher shows a lot of pace, maybe they could put him up to the slightly better team. Or he was obviously supposed to do testing and stuff, or a free practice session, I think it was, with Alfa Romeo, which is again surprising why
when
he went
they
to
had
Haas,
that rained out session, at
was
it Germany? I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't ask me questions like that. I don't know. But yeah, so that was the only other thought I entertained, is that maybe it could be Giovinazzi and Schumacher if they decide to move teams. But
I think even in that case, though, then you'd argue the other two would probably then go in the Haas seat instead of the Alfa Romeo seat.
It's true.
So I think one of those two, I think, is still going to end up on the grid.
Okay.
As to which one, might.
And funnily enough, if you asked me who was going to be in Haas, I'd pick Eilert over Schwartzman. So, you've put a real. Yeah, okay. But yeah, I'm going to go... The first one we've disagreed on, though, is Alfa Romeo, Giovinazzi and Schwartzman for me, and you have put Eilert in that seat instead of Schwartzman. So it will be interesting. I do agree that I think it'll be one of those two drivers, though. So, alrighty. 2 more teams. We'll move on to Haas. We've just talked about them, but we've got Haas, and again, this one probably should have been higher up for me, because I don't see him changing drivers. They're going to be Schumacher and Mazepin, I think. So...
I think my opinion on that as well would have changed. If we had recorded this maybe a week ago, I think I would have put more merit to maybe them having that year with Mazepin, but maybe trying to move somewhere else. But I think with the reveal, and they've fully shown the fact that actually almost it's like a Doralton Capital takeover, but for Haas side, I think really for the future, they're going, look, we need to get some big resource behind us. Unfortunately, Ural Kai.
Ural Kai, that's it.
Oh, it's something like that. I was
Okay.
Anyway, I think they've shown that that's their backing for next year. And yes, you could say, okay, but they've had different backings. They had Rich Energy, which was their title, and they went away. They had Rocket, that was their title. That suddenly went away. So you could argue for this as well. They could do that. But I think because it's tied to a driver, and I think because a lot of it is, they're not paying for this year's car, right? They're paying for next year's car. They're not going to be going, yes, we're going to do this year's car to the top. It's like, no, this year's car is basically going to be the same. They're putting their money and resources into it for next year. They're not going to suddenly pay for next year's car and then pull their sponsorship, pull their driver.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's unfortunately, it's unfortunately,
no, unfortunately,
it's like the Mazepin's going to be there. I think, on his credit though, I think he will still put in for performances. I know Mazepin has had some controversial on track.
He's not a bad
he's very
driver,
he is slightly overly aggressive, but that can be better than being just slow or not having good performances because you crash out. You know what I mean? I think because he ends up in the stewards now and then. We've seen that with Magnussen, was often known to be a bit feisty and up in the stewards a lot, and that rivalry between him and Hulkenberg, but he's still, you don't look back on him now and go, oh, he was crap. He was really aggressive. You still go, he's had a fair career and he at least gave it a shot,
Yeah.
And that's even what some people gave, what Christian Horner often said about his drivers, that pass through. Even Kvyat, someone's got kudos now and then for being a bit of aggressive and being the torpedo, you know what I mean? At least he gave it a shot, where you saw with Gasly, where he...
Verstappen as well. Like, he started his career being very, very aggressive and getting into so many incidents.
And he still knows his star right now, where often he'll put himself in a position where if you don't move out the way to dodge me, we're going to crash. And, he plays that kind of game, which... as I said, there's almost like a political moral standpoint to talk about there. I think it doesn't help that Mazepin is that kind of driver and brings all this other negativity, you know what I mean? Like you talk about Verstappen being aggressive sometime or Magnussen, but then you don't look at, how they get their seat or their background. You go, oh yeah, they've also got a shady father or a shady background, their backgrounds are, they fought their way up from kids and everything like that. But then you look at Mazepin and everything, from that side, we don't need to talk about more because there's enough online if you want to Google it.
Yeah.
So, I think that's another reason why Haas wouldn't get rid of them is because A, he's got all that backing, which is going to go into next year, which is pivotal for them in their future of F1 and climb the grid, and he's going to put in the performances, I think. They can't really get rid of him for that reason as well.
Yeah, sure. And Schumacher's a no-brainer. He's he's going to be in there for more than 1 year, isn't he? Like, unless
he's got a name there, and I think he needs 2 years anyway to really get up to speed, and then potentially look at what Ferrari are going to do with him or move to Alfa. He could move to Alfa after a year, I guess, as you said before.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
But I think it's more likely that he'll stay there and get that 2 years, and especially next year, regardless of because of the team he's in and why they're doing well, I think next year will be good for him. This year he can get used to the people and put his own input in for the development of next year's car, and then I think next year will really be the proving ground for Mick.
I think that it's all been talked about. They're probably training him up for Ferrari, aren't they? Like if one of
ultimately,
the drivers,
of course.
So I reckon it's not even a bad shout that he'll just stay, assuming Haas stay in the sport, he'll stay with Haas he'll do a George Russell and just stay with Haas for 2, 3, maybe even 4 years if he's basically all but been promised a seat at Ferrari when the seat opens up. Considering at least right now Ferrari don't have any other options if one of their drivers, for whatever reason doesn't go in.
Or if in 3 years' time or 2 years' time, for example, one of them wants to move or maybe they're not satisfied with one of them.
Yeah,
then,
exactly.
Yeah, so that's what they're building him up for.
I think it would be in his best interest to sort of, tough it out again. It's almost the exact same thing, like George Russell. Yeah. Tough it out for a few years. Maybe you'll be at the back of the grid, but you get some experience working with the team. Experience driving the cars, and then when an opportunity does arise, you can take it. So yeah.
And I think he's got the advantage in that, as I've said, his experience has shown that often he does better when he has a bit of time to be able to speed up and get up to speed with things. So I think rather than maybe like Leclerc or, I don't know, let's choose an example, even Ocon, where when they came in, they were expected to really hit the ground running. I think he has the advantage where even if he hit the ground running, there's nowhere to really put him, you know what I mean? It's not like Leclerc, where he really showed his stuff and they were like, okay, you've convinced us that it is good to take the risk on you to move you to Ferrari. I think in this case, even if he did that, it still would be a case of good job, keep it up, we'll see you in a few years,
Yeah, exactly.
So I think regardless if he hits the ground running or he needs a bit of speeding up, he's got that, he's allowed to... He's
allowed to work his way
freedom.
into
They're
his
not going to
career.
kick him out after a year because maybe he's a bit slow, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Or I doubt it's unlikely that Haas are going to move him aside for, especially keeping Mazepin. They've got that money side sorted. They don't need a second money driver at this stage, considering how much takeover almost it is. So I think he's in a good spot to stay there a few years and get up to speed, and I think we can be very excited about him for the future. He's probably in a better spot than he could be. The only bad thing about his spot is you say he's maybe associated being in that team, but that's really it. That's not gonna be his legacy when you think back.
No, of course not. No.
So
everyone has. Well, not everyone. A lot of people have. Maybe not to this extent, but you have a shitty driver sometimes. It's a shitty teammate sometimes. People remember the individual performances, not necessarily the team performances. So,
and you do have drivers that have come in as pay drivers as well. It's easy to forget that even Gutierrez and Perez came into the sport with, I don't remember his name, but I don't remember what he does. The Mexican basically is very wealthy and enjoys sponsoring young Mexican talent, and he effectively paid for both their drives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So you don't think back in that and go, oh, Perez, yeah, he came in as a pay driver. It's like, no, he came in and he worked his socks off to show his stuff, you know what I mean? Yeah. And even now, even to Racing Point Force India, apparently he brought a lot of money into there, you know, but you see that as a good thing. You're going, cool, it's a driver who's really quick, but he's still bringing back into the team.
Exactly.
You see it as like a good thing almost that he's helping them out,
it's rather
like
than
a dream he's
driver.
Really struggling. Yeah, they're just holding on to him because he's giving money to the team. You know?
Yeah.
So...
Sure.
Anyway,
should
we move on?
We spent a lot of time on a team that didn't change. So us is Schumacher and Mazepin.
It's interesting for the future. And I think it's cool to think about where they'll be next year and in the future.
Yeah. So, well, I don't think either of us see changes at Haas. So, last team though, and this is one where we've got Williams. I should state that. Yeah, this one was an interesting one for me. I'll start with the first one. Latifi's going to stay there, isn't he?
I don't. Okay.
I think he's going to stay. Oh, you don't think so?
I don't know about that.
Oh, you think he's going to drop? Okay. Obviously, we both think that Russell's going to go to Mercedes, so that obviously leaves one spot there. I do think that Williams will keep Latifi. Obviously, he brings in a little bit of money. The second person I've actually got it as like it's either one or the other, and it's all dependent on, maybe this is, I'm hedging my bets, but I literally, I could not choose. But I watched, Tomo F1. Yeah, he does driver predictions as well, and I actually watched his video on it. He made a really good point about possibly Bottas even moving to Williams. Depending if he actually wants to stay in the sport. He's obviously raced with Williams before. I'm just not sure if he wants to totter around at the back of the grid after being in Mercedes. I don't know, but
you don't sound like you've made up your mind yet.
I haven't. No, I definitely.
I've got down what I've got down, and I'm happy to justify it. I'm not reacting to anything until you finish, because I think mine. Well, I want to kind of go into it.
I'll say that I think Latifi is going to stay. I think, with the money he brings to the team, I think he does. He does enough to sort of warrant staying at least another year. I think Bottas. It's between Bottas if he wants to stay in the sport. If he decides that he doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be at the back of the grid after leaving Mercedes, assuming that he does leave Mercedes, if he wants to go and do something else, then I've put Aitken in that second seat. So it's either Latifi Bottas or Latifi Aitken for me, and that's entirely dependent, I think, on Bottas, whether or not he wants to stay. So Aitken, he's obviously raced with Williams, and is he the test driver, I think, still for this year as well.
He's one of the juniors.
One of the juniors, so I think he'll slot into that team. I think so. Yeah, I wasn't sure about this, but I do think it'll probably more likely Latifi and Aitken. I don't see Bottas going all the way to the back of the grid, but the fact that he does have ties with Williams, having. He went from Williams to Mercedes, and he did really, really well at Williams. That's the reason why he got the Mercedes seat in the first place. So, but yeah, I think it's all dependent on him and whether or not he wants to stay. So, that's my thoughts anyway. So it sounds like you might have something pretty different.
So when I was putting this list together, I kind of thought about the few of the other teams that we had a bit more thought, like AlphaTauri, maybe Alfa Romeo, and then I assume those would be the trickiest ones. And then I got to Williams, and I actually really thought about it. I went, actually, no, this is really tricky, because it is dependent on other moves. It is dependent a bit on their juniors.
They have got a few juniors as well. So.
I think I'll preface it by saying I think a big thing about this year and then leading into the next is that, I guess in terms of their takeover and their Dalton Capleton takeover and their resurgence, and their, what's the correct word to use? Their refresh almost, where they're trying to refresh everything to really reconsider every aspect, everything behind the scenes and on the scenes, to then launch forward to really figure out how they're going to get back in the midfield almost, right?
Yeah.
I'd say at this point, I have pretty fair confidence that based on their launch this year and things that are coming out, that next year that they will be up near or to the near back of the midfield at least. Probably more competitive they've been in the last few years.
Yeah.
I have pretty fair confidence to say that, and I think because of that, I think it'll be quite likely that Bottas is going to go back there.
You think so?
I'm thinking back of where Massa, after his Ferrari stint, went back there.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot he did that.
You see a lot of drivers talk about how, even when you saw Vettel and you said, are they going to retire because they don't want to tootle around the midfield? You see people all the time say, yes, a guy who's been at the top or near the top could choose to get another seat in the midfield, but they might not actually enjoy it, You even look at Alonso, who kind of stuck with it for a bit. There was a different story there, I guess.
Yeah.
But you often have that we have a top driver that gets downgraded and you wonder if they should even bother or, whether they're going to get anything out of it. I think Williams will improve enough to a point where Bottas is a realistic chance for them to bring him back. I think, I already said before, but I don't think Latifi will get the seat again. I know he brings some backing, but I think that was almost like interim backing while Doralton fully took over and did their whole process there. Okay, and I think they have enough where they don't really need that. It'll certainly help, but I think unless he really performs really well, it'll be a case of if he was a really good driver and brought some backing,
again, like
boom,
a Perez,
let's do it, you know what I mean? Yeah, I think he's just not there enough. I think he's similar to how, what was his name? Who was the Russian driver they had a few years ago? I remember his face, not his name.
Oh, God. Putting me on the spot. I have no idea. Sirotkin?
Sergei Sirotkin.
Wow, I pulled that out of fucking nowhere.
I think it's a similar case. As I said, I can remember his name, him being interviewed. Couldn't remember his name.
Yeah.
I think a similar case where he had his performance was probably still a bit too low, but he similarly brought backing.
Yeah.
I think Latifi, if it was against him, would do a bit better. But I think it's not enough considering this new resurgence. So I don't think they'll return either driver. And yes, I know that's ironic considering we're constantly going on about the fact that you need to retain two drivers going forward. I think Bottas will be enough there where he'll bring so much experience from above, and because he's been there semi-recently enough in terms of the people that are still there, that he should be able to sink in with relative ease compared to if they're bringing in a fresh driver.
Yeah.
So I think they'll refresh both. I think it is quite likely for Bottas, considering if he gets booted from Mercedes, even if maybe he's only there for a year. I think it might be dependent on how confident he feels. I think he'd need a lot of talking from within and see how they're going.
Yeah.
Very similar, I guess, to how Vettel was with Aston Martin, where I imagine he would have taken his time, talked to a lot of people internally, seen how they were looking for the next few years in terms of their plan, their investment, everything like that before Vettel committed to going somewhere like Aston Martin.
Yeah.
I think it'll be similar for Bottas. I think there'll be less focus on it just because it's Bottas rather than Vettel. In terms of, Vettel being, 4 times world champion and really been at the top for a while, where Bottas has been up there. Similar, I guess, to Massa, although you'd argue Massa was closer to a title, of course, being only 1 point off a title.
Yeah.
But still similar to how he then dropped off a big, he dropped off the top a bit. He was still in the top team, but he didn't really get there. Similar to Raikkonen, you know what I mean, at Ferrari, and then chose to go to Alfa, even if maybe for different reasons than someone like Bottas or Vettel would. But I think it is looking good for Williams for next year. I think they're very confident. I have fair confidence in them of terms of their all they're out with the old and with the new. Even for this year, now they're going to go full beans of going into next year with all their new resources and everything they've set up. I guess the other question is then their second driver. Yeah. If they are going to refresh both of them.
Yeah.
I think the two you do have to very much consider is Dan Ticktum and Jack Aitken.
Dan Ticktum. I didn't even consider Ticktum.
There is. You could say that Jack Aitken is the more easier package in that Dan Ticktum, it's no wonder they have a YouTube video dedicated to the radio antics of Dan Ticktum because he's often speaking his mind and he sees an accident and goes, oh, what a bloody idiot, and you know what I mean?
It's entertaining to listen to sometimes.
Yes, but I think Williams haven't strayed from having a driver. It's maybe a bit more... not behind the limelight, easy to interview. They don't mind drivers that maybe it might get challenged a bit more, or might speak their mind a bit more, or they like doing something different, you know what I mean? Like the fact they brought Kubica back in, I think was quite different.
Yeah.
Even when they brought in Sirotkin, you know what I mean? I just think that in a lot of other teams, if Dan Ticktum was in their ranks, I don't think they would pick him up, but I think Williams having him in their ranks wouldn't mind that. Outside the pure pace stuff that he brings with him, I don't think that would deter them from picking him up.
Sure.
If you do look at Dan Ticktum versus Jack, and why I would pick him over Jack, I think Jack Aitken does have pace there. but he's just not as consistent as Dan Ticktum.
The consistency is a big thing.
Is really quick. Like, he's a bloody good driver. I think the fact he speaks his mind over the radio, he's also here. You also hear that behind the scenes as well. He really speaks his mind. He's really motivated in driving his mechanics and saying his word and being honest and pushing them forward. I think that will be a massive thing for Williams next year to have a character like that.
Sure.
I think if you pair someone like that with Bottas as well, I think it'll be a really good pairing, those two. They may come from different kind of worlds, but I can kind of just see it working. I think if Williams were just continuing down the same trajectory, they'd probably pick an Aitken as just another safe bet. Maybe someone who'd be just for the reason of just getting someone slightly better than Latifi, and they'd probably go Aitken, especially if they were even keeping George Russell. I think they'd probably maybe go with that as well. But I think just with the trajectory they're going, I think a Dan Ticktum, someone who really on his day can punch above his weight, even if he might be a bit more inconsistent or have a crash near here and there, I think they'd really value that. Sure. I think they've got that consistent package, what Bottas will bring. I think he'll be very consistent. I think they'd like someone who'd be a bit more up and down. You know, they wouldn't want another, as you say, another Sorokin, another Latifi in that team. So I think it'll be Bottas and Dan Ticktum for those reasons.
All right. Yeah,
I did give it a fair amount of thought. That
wow, okay, yeah, that's probably the most different I think we've had. So you've almost swayed me a bit, but I'm going to stick with mine. I'm going to stick with it. Of course, can't sway me that much. But so yeah, you've gone Bottas and Ticktum, and I've gone Latifi and Bottas / Aitken, and that's I got to pick one, don't I? We'll go Bottas. We'll go Latifi and Bottas. I won't fence it.
You can't just make one team and we have both drivers different, can you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't do it.
Change your mind, damn it.
I don't know.
Do it for the views.
Yeah, I think... Yeah. I don't know. It's tough. That's a really tough team. Yeah, but we'll go Latifi and Bottas and we'll call it at that. So
yeah, as I said, I think the biggest factor is where they're at next year.
I think
have quite an effect.
Your comments actually about that, and it's something I've speculated for this year. I think Williams will do a lot better this year than they have in the past as well. So assuming that is an upward trajectory for them, then maybe Williams isn't such a bad move for someone like Bottas. So yeah, maybe it is a bit more likely than I first gave it thought. So. There you go. Those are our predictions. For the most part, the same. We had a couple of little differences in there. Curious to know what your thoughts are on who you think are going to be in the seats. Leave them in the comments. If we have any in there, we'll try and reply to them. I'm always curious to see. This is one of the more fun discussions that you can have. Who's going to be where? That's everyone loves this sort of stuff. So, but yeah, we'll revisit this. Next year, I guess, when everything's decided, and see just how wrong we are. But yeah, thanks.
What storylines we got wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Williams to exit the sport. Oh dear.
Everything is Williams. Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting actually if there is there's been talks of new teams coming out. I don't think it'll happen as soon as next year, but
that's a final question. Yeah, do we think there'll be a new team next year? I think
not next year.
Soon.
I think.
Not with the new rules as well. Yes, I think Haas came in with the new rules, but I don't think a team this time would. Yeah. I think they'd wait a year.
I think there's 2 or 3 teams that are in the wings, and I think almost all of them are waiting for the 2025 regs, like the new things. Like they're kind of a bit tentative. So I think maybe for 2023, 2024 in preparation for that, possibly. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think next year.
It gives them time to see how all the new cost-saving measures are working anyway. They want to see that actually in full practice to be able to commit to something.
Yeah, exactly. So, we still think it's going to be the 10 teams. So that was... it's a valid question, though. So, but anyway, those are our predictions. Let us know your ones. But we'll see you for the next video. Thanks for watching, all.
Catches.
Bye.